For the first time in years, landlords across America are not raising their voices. They are lowering their prices and quietly asking the same question tenants have been asking for a decade. What will it take to make you stay? For 3 relentless years, rent did the impossible. Leases renewed with $100 jumps. Waiting lists wrapped around new buildings. You could open any rental app and watch prices tick higher in real time. From the Sunbelt boomtowns to the glittering coastal towers, it felt like tenants had no options and investors could do no wrong. In 2025, that story is breaking. Empty units are starting to outnumber eager applicants. Brand new buildings are lighting up only a handful of windows at night. Landlords who used to brag about offers above asking are suddenly emailing tenants with discounts, free months, and gift cards. Oversupply has arrived. Outmigration is real, and a full-scale backlash against unaffordable rent is finally reshaping the market. This is Discover the Nation, and today we are counting down the top 10 cities where rent is falling fast in 2025, and landlords are starting to panic. We are going to look at the places where developers built too much, where residents finally walked away, and where the balance of power in housing is quietly flipping back toward the renter. If you want more data-driven breakdowns of what is really happening in America's housing market, make sure you are subscribed to Discover the Nation and turn on notifications. The numbers we are about to walk through could save you thousands of dollars a year in rent and keep you out of the next bubble. Let us dive in. Number 10. Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte used to be the quiet success story of the South. A banking hub with a steady stream of jobs, predictable growth, and comparatively reasonable prices. That reputation pulled in a wave of new residents all through the early 2020s, and developers responded the only way they know how, by building. From South End to University City, entire blocks of low-rise buildings gave way to luxury apartments with rooftop lounges, co-working spaces, and dog spas. For a while, every one of those units seemed to lease instantly, and rent increases at renewal felt automatic. Then the math shifted. By 2025, Charlotte is facing a simple but brutal equation. Too many high-end units, not enough renters who can pay what those pro formas promised. New supply keeps hitting the market from projects started in the boom years, but wage growth for young renters has flattened, and the cost of everything else, from groceries to car insurance, has climbed. Leasing agents who once quoted take-it-or-leave-it prices are now quietly offering 2 free months on a 12-month lease, or a month free plus reduced parking fees if you sign this week. Some buildings are waiving application fees and deposits. Others are throwing in storage units or internet service that used to be billed as premium extras. In shiny corridors, you can hear it in the sales pitch. More focus on flexible move-in dates, more willingness to negotiate, less talk of long waiting lists that no longer exist. In the urban core, you can see the strain after dark. Entire vertical stacks of balconies with no lights on, amenities that look amazing in photos but sit empty on weeknights. Older garden-style complexes in the outer rings are quietly cutting asking rents just to keep up. For investors who bought at peak pricing expecting constant rent growth, returns are getting squeezed from both sides. Costs are up, rents are softening, cash flow is shrinking. For renters, however, this is the first real chance in years to negotiate in a city that was racing toward coastal-level prices. Number 9. Salt Lake City, Utah. Salt Lake City went from under the radar to national headline almost overnight. Tech companies opened satellite offices. Outdoor lifestyle brands flocked to the Wasatch Front. Remote workers decided they wanted ski slopes and trailheads instead of crowded coastal freeways. The result was predictable. A once modest rental market exploded. Developers carved new neighborhoods into the valley, filling them with mid-rise apartments and polished townhomes aimed squarely at high-income newcomers. Rents jumped so quickly that longtime residents started to feel like strangers in their own city. A 2-bedroom that once housed a family on a single income suddenly demanded tech-level paychecks just to qualify. By 2025, the backlash has arrived. Some of those newcomers left as quickly as they arrived. Remote work flexibility cut both ways, sending people onto even cheaper states. Tech volatility cooled hiring. Meanwhile, all those projects that looked brilliant on a spreadsheet in 2021 are now delivering hundreds of units into a softer market. Vacancy signs are appearing along major corridors. New buildings that expected to lease up in a few months are still offering concessions half a year later. In older stock, landlords who tried to chase those luxury prices are being forced to step back down as tenants trade up into nicer units for the same money. You can feel the shift in places like Sugar House in downtown, where leasing offices now advertise student specials, reduced deposits, and shorter lease terms that would have been dismissed before. Some owners are even allowing flexible move-out clauses just to reduce churn risk. There is another pressure point here that investors underestimated. Utah families are big, and many prefer ownership. When mortgage rates dipped even slightly, a chunk of the renter pool peeled off and bought homes of their own, leaving more apartments chasing fewer households. Salt Lake City is not collapsing. It is recalibrating. But that recalibration includes landlords cutting rents, offering deals, and facing something they have not seen in a long time: real pushback from tenants who finally have alternatives. Number 8. Tampa, Florida. Tampa was one of the crowned winners of the pandemic era. Sunshine, no state income tax, lower prices than Miami, and a flood of inbound migration from the Northeast turned this metro into a poster child for the new Florida. Developers saw the trend and sprinted to keep up. New high-rises along the water, massive suburban complexes in Pasco and Hillsborough County, build-to-rent communities that promised steady yields as far as the eye could see. On paper, the story looked unstoppable. For a while, it was. By 2025, supply has caught up to the story and then some. Rising insurance costs and property taxes have eaten into disposable income. Homeowners are feeling the squeeze, and would-be buyers are having second thoughts about committing long-term. That leaves more people staying in rentals at the same time that thousands of new units hit the market. On the ground, it looks like aggressive marketing. Billboards advertising move-in specials on every major highway. Emails from leasing offices that once ignored you now offering lower rates if you sign this week. Entire complexes that were once selective now approving applicants they would have turned away 2 years ago. In trendy districts like Channelside in Midtown, it is not unusual to see multiple competing buildings offering similar amenities and nearly identical floor plans. The only real difference now is how much free rent they are willing to give to hit occupancy targets. Some investors who bought condos to rent to short-term guests are bailing out altogether. Tourism is still strong, but the cost of carrying these units has gone through the roof. Many of those properties are crossing over into the long-term rental pool, adding even more competition. For tenants willing to move a few blocks or accept a slightly older building, the savings are real. In pockets of Tampa and its surrounding suburbs, asking rents are retreating from their peaks, and landlords are swallowing price cuts rather than let units sit idle, something unthinkable just a few years ago. Number 7. Denver, Colorado. Denver spent a decade on every list of hottest cities in America. Young professionals flocked to its breweries and bike lanes. Remote workers decided they wanted mountain views instead of cubicle walls. For developers and institutional landlords, it looked like the closest thing to a sure thing. They built as if demand would never slow. Glass towers rose over Union Station. Mid-rise apartments multiplied in Rhino and along every light rail line. Single-family homes were bought in bulk by rental funds that planned to hold them for years. Then affordability snapped. By 2025, the gap between what the average Denver resident can comfortably pay and what many landlords are asking has become too wide. Renters are doubling up, moving to cheaper suburbs, or leaving Colorado altogether. At the same time, job growth has cooled and some high-paying roles are being relocated or cut. Vacancies are creeping higher. The newest, most expensive properties are feeling it first. To fill them, operators are rolling out serious concessions, which in turn put pressure on older buildings to match or drop their rents.
In neighborhoods like Capitol Hill and Five Points, tenants who once accepted every renewal increase are now touring 3 or 4 buildings and coming back to negotiate. They're asking for lower rates, free parking, or credits toward utilities, and they're often getting them. The rental market is not providing easy cover for investors either. With more accidental landlords listing units that would not sell at their asking price, inventory on the rental side has climbed. That has brought down rent growth in the very suburbs that were once considered bulletproof. Neighborhoods that once saw consistent rent jumps each renewal cycle are now seeing renewals come back flat or even lower. Tenants who shop around before signing a new lease are discovering that loyalty often costs more than moving. Denver still sells the lifestyle, and people will always pay something for that. But the era when landlords could count on automatic appreciation and automatic rent hikes is over. In a stretched city like this, the smallest shock can trigger a noticeable shift.
Number 6. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Philadelphia spent the early 2020s as one of the most talked about comeback stories on the East Coast. The city of brotherly love was not just a historic backdrop. It was a hot investment thesis. New arrivals from New York, New Jersey, and high-cost suburbs poured into Center City, University City, and the River Wards, filling row houses, loft conversions, and brand-new mid-rise buildings. Developers responded in the only way they know, with cranes, concrete, and wave after wave of new projects. Luxury apartments rose along the Schuylkill, in downtown corridors, and across neighborhoods like Northern Liberties and Fishtown. Small investors snapped up older duplexes and triplexes, turning them into rentals for students, nurses, and remote workers. For a while, everything leased, everything penciled out. It felt like every block was a renovation project and every unit had a waiting list. By 2025, the mood has shifted. The city still draws students, medical professionals, and office workers, but not at a pace that matches the flood of new units and investor expectations. Return-to-office policies are uneven, shrinking the need to live right next to downtown. At the same time, concerns about safety, taxes, and schools have nudged some families toward the suburbs. The result is a rental market that feels noticeably heavier. Renters who once scrambled for anything near transit or a university now have choices. They compare multiple buildings instead of grabbing the first available unit. They negotiate on rent, on parking, and on move-in fees. And more often than not, they are getting what they ask for. Newer buildings with gyms and concessions beat out older walk-ups that refuse to budge. Along major corridors and in the core, banners hang from balconies advertising deals that would have sounded unreal a few years ago. First month free, reduced security deposits, credits for signing a lease before the end of the week. Vacancy is no longer a minor detail. Some properties sit with entire floors only partially occupied, and concessions that were once reserved for slow winter leasing seasons are now standard. In nearby townships, single-family rentals and new townhome communities are feeling the squeeze too. When a tenant can choose between a fresh downtown unit with incentives and an older house at a similar monthly cost, owners of those houses are forced to compete. For landlords who assumed Philadelphia would remain an easy cash flow story forever, it is a sharp wake-up call and a costly reminder that even strong markets can overbuild and overreach. Number 5. Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix was the blazing heart of the Sun Belt boom. Families poured in from California. Investors followed, eager to ride a never-ending wave of population growth and rising rents. Entire subdivisions were bought by corporate landlords. New apartment complexes appeared along every freeway. On paper, the story made sense, until it did not. By 2025, Phoenix is living with the consequences of believing that growth is guaranteed. Thousands of new units have delivered in just a few years. At the same time, higher living costs, extreme summer heat, and slower job gains have taken the shine off the desert dream for some residents. Renters who can work from anywhere are beginning to ask whether triple-digit summers and rising utility bills are worth it. Some are choosing cooler climates or smaller markets instead. Meanwhile, the surge of corporate investor buying has slowed dramatically and in some cases reversed.
Leasing teams are now competing fiercely. Rents that ratcheted up every renewal cycle are being discounted. Properties that once had waiting lists are advertising on every channel they can find. In suburban stretches of the East Valley and the far west side, you can see the result in real time. For rent signs that stay up longer, online listings with the same photos resurfacing week after week, each time with a slightly lower asking price or a new incentive. Insurance and maintenance costs have also crept higher, especially for older properties struggling with extreme heat and wear. That leaves many smaller landlords squeezed in the middle, torn between cutting rents further or risking prolonged vacancy. In the outer suburbs, where commute times stretch and amenities thin out, it is not uncommon to see multiple price reductions on the same unit over a few months. Prospective tenants know this and are taking their time instead of rushing applications. Phoenix is not crashing like it did during the last housing bust, but the easy money phase is over. For the first time in many years, renters in this metro can look at a listing and know they have leverage and choices.
Number 4. Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas knows booms and busts better than almost any city in America. During the most recent boom, the rental market looked like another jackpot. Californians moved in to escape high housing costs. Investors grabbed condos and single-family homes for short-term rentals. Apartment developers lined the valley with new projects aimed at service workers and telecommuters alike. In the middle of that rush, it was easy to forget that Las Vegas lives and dies by discretionary spending. By 2025, that reality has returned. Tourism is solid but not surging. Conventions are back but on tighter budgets. Casino hiring is cautious. For many locals, tips are smaller, hours are less predictable, and the cushion to absorb higher rent has disappeared. At the same time, all those buildings launched during the optimistic years are now open for business. Drive through Henderson, Summerlin, or the Southwest Valley, and you will see banners draped over new properties, promising move-in specials and discounts. Some owners have quietly shifted units from nightly rentals to year-long leases, adding to the glut. In older complexes closer to the Strip, landlords are learning that they can no longer simply raise rents and expect tenants to accept it. Residents who once stayed for convenience are now moving a few miles away to newer properties, offering more space for less money. As tenants shop around, they discover that loyalty is not rewarded the way it once was. A longtime renter at an older property may be paying more than a new arrival in a brand new building down the street. Landlords are responding with cuts they never expected to make. In some complexes, rents are slipping back toward levels you saw several years ago, especially after concessions are factored in. Others are experimenting with shorter lease terms, pet incentives, or bundled utilities just to stand out. Las Vegas has not stopped shining at night, but behind those lights, the spreadsheets have changed. For the first time in a while, renters have chips of their own to play, and the house is no longer guaranteed to win. Number 3. Miami, Florida. Miami built its recent identity on extremes. Extreme wealth, extreme weather, extreme demand. During the early 2020s, the city became the unofficial capital of remote work glamour. Crypto founders, hedge fund managers, and influencers all descended on the same glass towers overlooking the bay. Landlords responded in kind. Rents soared. Locals were pushed aside. By 2025, that wave is rolling back. Some of the speculative wealth that flooded in has moved on or simply evaporated. Crypto fortunes shrank. High-flying firms cut staff. Remote workers quietly relocated again once the novelty wore off and the bills arrived. Rental data now shows asking rents drifting down several percent from their peak, with effective rents falling even faster once concessions are included. At the same time, the true cost of owning and operating property here has exploded. Insurance premiums have soared. Building maintenance rules have tightened. Associations are raising fees to pay for repairs and upgrades that can no longer be postponed. Reserve requirements and structural inspections are no longer abstract line items. They are forcing real increases in monthly carrying costs. Those costs have to land somewhere. For a while, they were passed on to renters. Then, renters hit their limit. Vacancies have climbed in once untouchable neighborhoods: Brickell, downtown, parts of Miami Beach. Buildings that used to brag about their exclusivity are now offering incentives: free parking, reduced deposits, rent credits spread across the first year.
Some are quietly negotiating renewals below last year's rent just to keep reliable tenants in place. In more modest neighborhoods on the mainland, landlords who tried to mimic luxury pricing are now quietly walking those numbers back. Tenants who could once barely hang on are now being courted with renewal discounts rather than hit with another steep increase. For the first time in years, renters can compare options instead of grabbing the first halfway affordable unit. Short-term rental operators are also feeling the squeeze from increased regulation and softer travel demand at the margins. Many of their units are ending up in the long-term pool, pushing rents downward as owners try not to bleed cash month after month. Some are offloading properties entirely, adding to resale inventory. Miami remains visually stunning, but in 2025, it is also a case study in what happens when a city assumes global demand will cover any cost. Tenants are voting with their feet, and for the first time in years, the math is starting to favor them instead of the skyline.
Number 2. San Francisco, California. San Francisco is not just facing a rental slowdown. It is facing an identity crisis. For decades, this city represented the peak of urban tech wealth, startups, stock options, and salaries that seemed to defy gravity. Rents followed that same trajectory, pushing deep into territory that only a narrow slice of workers could afford. The pandemic cracked that model. Remote work scattered employees. Downtown offices emptied out. By 2025, the reset is in full view. Entire commercial corridors remain underused. Office towers that once locked in tenants with long leases are quietly negotiating exits or downsizing. Fewer daily workers downtown means less demand for nearby rentals, especially at top-tier prices. Vacancy rates in some central districts have climbed into the double digits, a level that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. At the same time, concerns over public safety, cleanliness, and overall quality of life have pushed some residents to nearby metros and other states. Those departures have chipped away at the renter base that kept vacancy rates low even when rents felt impossible. The constant churn of high-income newcomers has slowed, and that alone changes the arithmetic for landlords. Landlords are now offering what would have been unthinkable concessions a few years ago. Months of free rent on high-end units, flexible lease terms, dramatic reductions in asking rents for properties that linger. In some buildings, advertised rents stay high, while private offers quietly undercut them by hundreds of dollars per month. In classic neighborhoods like Soma and parts of the Mission, you can find listings that have been repriced several times over the course of a single season. Even long-cherished rent growth assumptions are being rewritten in real time. Spreadsheets that once assumed annual increases are now being reworked around flat or declining income. Condo owners who once counted on short-term corporate tenants are taking what they can get from long-term renters. Investors who bought at the very top faces a nightmare choice: cut rents and accept negative cash flow, or sit on empty units and hope for a rebound that may take years. Either path puts pressure on loans, reserves, and exit plans. San Francisco will likely reinvent itself again, but in 2025, the lesson is stark. Even the most prestigious markets can overreach, and when they do, tenants eventually gain the upper hand and the courage to walk away. The brand name still carries weight, but the bargaining power no longer belongs to landlords alone.
Number 1. Austin, Texas. If there is one city that captures the boom-to-bust arc of America's rental story, it is Austin. In just a few short years, Austin transformed from quirky college capital to the unofficial headquarters of the new tech era. Companies announced splashy moves. Founders snapped up estates on the lake. Entire neighborhoods were razed and rebuilt as luxury towers and dense mixed-use districts. Rents followed the hype straight up. By the peak, it felt like everyone from software engineers to service workers was paying more than they could afford just to stay close to the action. Developers looked at those numbers and decided they could not lose. They broke ground on project after project. Pre-lease campaigns sold the story of endless demand and permanent scarcity. By 2025, the bill for that overconfidence is due. Thousands upon thousands of new units have opened or are nearing completion. At the same time, the boom in tech hiring has cooled. Some firms have cut staff. Others have slowed their growth plans. Stock-based wealth that once cushioned high rents has taken hits, leaving tenants more cautious about long-term commitments. Rent trackers now show effective rents slipping as concessions pile up. Tenants now have a choice Austin has not seen in years: stay and negotiate, or move a few blocks and get a better deal from a new building offering weeks or months of free rent. Renewals that once arrived with automatic 10% hikes now show flat lines or modest reductions. For the first time in a decade, walking away from a renewal is a real option. Luxury complexes that once curated waiting lists are sending out promotional emails. They're offering credits, discounts, furnished units, anything to keep occupancy rates high enough to satisfy lenders. Leasing offices that used to screen aggressively are suddenly very interested in compromise. In East Austin and along newly developed corridors, the contrast is stark. Sleek lobbies, empty mailrooms, ample parking, and leasing agents with plenty of time to give tours. The energy is there, but the bodies to fill every unit are not. In the surrounding suburbs, from Round Rock to Kyle, single-family rentals once treated as bulletproof investments are sitting vacant longer. Some landlords are dropping rents for the first time since they bought, simply to avoid missing payments on their own loans and to keep their lenders calm. Others are offering flexible terms, pets allowed, and upgrades just to secure a 12-month lease. The city that seemed invincible is now ground zero for the rental collapse. And for renters who have waited years for leverage, this is the first real opening in a long time.
Across these 10 cities, one theme runs through every statistic and every empty unit. You cannot raise rents forever while wages stagnate, while the cost of living explodes, and while people gain more flexibility to live anywhere. There is always a breaking point. In 2025, we are finally seeing what it looks like when renters reach that point and push back. They move in together. They leave expensive metros. They demand concessions. They simply say no. Oversupply, once a distant warning in investor presentations, is now visible on every skyline. Outmigration, once dismissed as temporary, is slowly reshaping demand. The unaffordability backlash is real, and it is rewriting the rules of the rental market. If you are a renter in any of these cities, this may be your moment to negotiate, to shop around, and to reclaim some breathing room in your budget. If you are an investor or a landlord, this is the time to be honest about risk, not just reward. You have been watching Discover the Nation, where we cut through the headlines and show you how America's biggest economic shifts feel on the ground. If this deep dive on the 2025 rental collapse helped you see your own city more clearly, tap like, share this video with someone who is deciding to move, and make sure you are subscribed so you never miss the next breakdown. Tell us in the comments which city you want us to investigate next, because in this market, information is not just power, it is protection.